Hello and welcome to Ellroy Reads. This is a show where I bring you books and the inside stories behind those books and how they relate to James Ellroy. I have an absolutely great show for you this week, but first, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. I'm here every week and bringing you episodes every week and become a supporter of the show. Okay, thanks. Okay, today's book is John le Carré, the Biography by Adam Sisman. Now, this is a really good biography, and it relates in a number of ways to James Ellroy. I'll be going into that. Adam Sisman would seem like an extremely good choice to be John le Carré's biographer because he had written a number of acclaimed biographies on A.G.P. Taylor and even Boswell's Presumptuous Task. And when he got round to working on le Carré, a number of authors had tried and failed. Firstly, there was Graham Lord, who le Carré actually threatened with legal action. Then there was Robert Harris, the acclaimed novelist himself. And Harris actually, when he kind of gave up on the project, recommended Sisman. Sisman was actually married to Harris's editor. But he said, he warned him, you might never be able to publish it in le Carré's lifetime because le Carré is so secretive. And le Carré had been against a biography of him for some time, but he came round to the idea. So they began working together, and Sisman says that le Carré was often scintillating company. And the book that was produced goes into real depth as to use him by his birth name, David Cornwall, and we'll call him le Carré just for ease of reference in the show. His childhood, his very troubled relationship with his father, Ronald Cornwall, who was a notorious con man, his relationship with his sister, who became a noted actress, the family dynamic, and then le Carré's intelligence career with MI5 and MI6, and how that was eventually, he gave that up to pursue his career as a novelist. He didn't fully give it up until the publication of Spy Who Came Out for the Cold, which was a massive success, and subsequently hugely successful novels, The Looking Glass War, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, just to mention some of the best. Smiley's People, The Honourable Schoolboy, I'm not going quite in order here, but A Perfect Spy, The Little Drummer Girl, and then in the post-Cold War period, where Sisman says he feels le Carré had actually was past his peak, but there were still many great novels. The Night Manager, The Constant Gardener, The Tailor of Panama. And even when le Carré wasn't at his best, say in novels like Absolute Friends or Single and Single, he was still the greatest spy novelist of his generation. So, a little bit of background story behind the novel. Sisman and le Carré seem to work together very well. Where they kind of came undone is that it was common knowledge, well, it was an open secret, le Carré was twice married, that he had many lovers, many mistresses, and like any biographer, Sisman thought it was his duty to talk to them, as many who would agree to talk to him. Many of them said, I'll only agree to talk to you with le Carré's permission. And le Carré, who'd kind of given Sisman carte blanche at the onset of the biography, subsequently kind of sabotaged those interviews once he realized how close Sisman was getting to him. So in many ways, Sisman felt kind of hamstrung by it. And there is actually relatively little in the first edition of the biography about le Carré's infidelities. The only one that he goes into in depth is the affair that essentially ended his first marriage, which was with Susan Kennaway. And it was actually a love triangle with the novelist Susan Kennaway, her husband James Kennaway, a famous novelist, author of Tunes of Glory. It was a menage a trois. And le Carré had written about that relationship. One of the reasons Sisman could write about that one is that it was such an open secret that it would be ridiculous for any biographer not to write about it. He had to write about it. Le Carré had fictionalized it in his novel The Naive and Sentimental Lover, which was his attempt to get away from spy fiction. And he might have got away from it permanently if it were not for the fact that the novel received absolutely awful reviews and, didn't sell well. And, Le Carré was extremely hurt by that. But what does he do? He goes back and he goes back to his kind of natural stomping ground, spy fiction, and he produces Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, one of the greatest spy novels of all time. And he puts any thought of more novels, more literary fiction like The Naive and Sentimental Lover behind him. But anyway, James Kennaway had written about the relationship in the novel, in his novel Some Gorgeous Accident. And then there had been the release of the Kennaway Papers. So it had been dealt with in fiction and non-fiction. So Sisman had to write about it. There's no way of getting around that. And he did, and the novel was released to, great acclaim. There may have been one or two reviews where there was a noted feeling of censure in the second half, particularly with regards to Le Carré's marriages. And funnily enough, Sisman said after if he censored me over all of these affairs, he actually got upset. Le Carré, he got upset about a portrayal of a male friendship, which he felt Sisman had portrayed as too homoerotic, which is kind of hypocritical of Le Carré after shackling Sisman in so many ways. So the biography, is released. One of the admirers is James Ellroy, who is a great reader of biography, and we're going to be doing a few more episodes on biography going forward. And he actually reaches out to Sisman. He mentions in a New York Times by the book profile that they said, name 2 authors you'd like to write your biography. And Adam Sisman was one of them. And he subsequently reached out to Sisman through Andrew Wiley, who was their shared agent, Andrew the Jackal Wiley. And Sisman declined. And I later found out some of the reasons why he declined. Because I was obviously, subsequently after Sisman declined, I was appointed James Ellroy's biographer. I actually reached out to Ellroy personally and wrote, and subsequently over the next few years wrote James Ellroy's biography, which is this book, Love Me, Fears and Danger, published by Bloomsbury, which won the Edgar. But while I'm working on Ellroy's biography, a lot subsequently comes out about Adam Sisman's struggles with Le Carré. Le Carré, sadly dies at the age of 89 after a fall. And shortly thereafter, A Kiss and Tell memoir is released by one of his paramours, Sue Dawson, writing under the pseudonym Sulika Dawson. It's called The Secret Heart. The full title is a bit of a mouthful. The Secret Heart, Le Carré and Me, Tales from a Secret Love Affair. And all I can say is this novel, it reads like a novel. This memoir is riveting. It is a kiss and tell, there's no getting around that. But she meets John le Carré in the early 80s because she's working on the production of audiobooks. And Le Carré is coming in to read. These are the very first audiobooks done on audio cassette. They could only do 2 hours per cassette, so it was her job to whittle them down. They had to be very, very ruthless in whittling them down. Le Carré comes in to read the audiobook. That's how they meet. He takes her out for a very, very boozy lunch. And they begin a very tawdry affair. And there's quite graphic details here into, say, the eroticism of that affair. And there's much talk of marriage. Le Carré's talking about, leaving his wife for her. That doesn't happen. He keeps putting deadlines on it. He keeps pushing back on those deadlines on it. They go abroad. They go on holidays to the Med together. And what was interesting is that Dawson realizes is that Le Carré uses tradecraft from his intelligence days to conduct his affairs. So things that are almost comical, but that he would do very religiously. For instance, he has cutouts throughout Europe, particularly in Switzerland, where he's very fond. He'd lived there for a time. He would handle many of his purchasing of the airline tickets and the booking of hotels for him. He would ask for someone for directions in the street, and then as soon as they give him the directions, he'd deliberately walk the other way, go in the opposite direction. if he saw someone and they said, "Where are you going?" he'd tell them Oslo, when he actually is going to like Corfu. He says, if you're going south, tell them north. He's just absolutely obsessed about not getting caught. What made me laugh so much about that is afterwards you'd be kind of like, well, if you're saying you're going to Oslo and you come back with with some deep tan because you've been in Corfu for a month, isn't that going to be obvious that you've lied? I mean, little things, literally walking in the street and using shop windows reflections to see, make sure you're not being followed, changing directions suddenly, stopping, tying your shoelaces or pretending to tie your shoelaces to see if anyone else stops who is following you. This is how he conducts his affairs, and he bumps, and while he's with Dawson, he sees his son at the airport on one of them kind of dirty weekends, and he almost has a heart attack. The relationship kind of ends abruptly in the 80s, and then after a 13-year period, Dawson notices that Le Carré, a 13-year period where she hasn't spoken to him, she notices Le Carré is giving a talk in London, and she's very, very anxious about this and wondering whether she should go. So she inquires about tickets, and the Ticketmaster says, "Oh, there's one seat left, and it's at the front." And she's like, "It's fate; it has to happen." So they resume their affair. This time it's even briefer. This time, of course, Le Carré's getting on a bit. He's put on weight. He's got a paunch, but it's just as passionate as it once was. This time he's not talking about leaving his wife and remarriage. It's just like, let's not put any pressure on us. And then the second affair ends over a very, very trivial reason. Dawson says they're planning another getaway together, and of course the Carré wants to pay in cash in a way that can't be traced. And she just says to him, "Look, I feel like if we were doing things together as a couple, could you book the tickets?" And he says that comment was a bit stiff. And that's it. Second time done. But she talks about how she loved him, even though it was a very, very flawed relationship in many respects. So The Secret Heart comes out, and one can only assume that Sisman would have been absolutely furious, because here's this really pivotal relationship in Le Carré's life. And he'd spoken to Sue Dawson, and it seemed like they got on very well. And he was very actually complimentary about her writing, which was very generous of him. And it is a good, very, very good book. But, one can only assume that Sisman would have been absolutely furious after all of that censor he was put through by Le Carré as his biographer. And when the biography came out, Le Carré was angry about it, and that kind of ended their relationship. Le Carré wrote Sisman a very icy letter to end things. But finally, third book, Sisman finishes his research. He releases The Secret Life of John le Carré after Sue Dawson has released her book. And this is about basic kind of like all of the sordid bits that he couldn't put into the biography. All of the relationships he's found out since, because the biography comes up, people contact him and said that, I had this relationship with John le Carré, or I knew John le Carré was in correspondence with me, or he's a total flirt. That's what happens when you write a book. It's like it just opens the floodgates for more and more research. So this book is kind of a kiss and tell as well, because it's about a string of affairs that Le Carré had and everything that Sisman is able to put together about him. And it's really interesting because it's really affected the two books, or the three books if we include the original biography. It's really affected John le Carré's reputation because, particularly in his later years, he was portraying himself as the grand old man of British literature, very, very wise, and he'd become a sage, perhaps in his own eyes, because he became very anti-American around the time of, previously he'd been kind of pro-American, skeptical, but during the Cold War, he was just like, there was, alternative. He was very pro-American in terms of like, we need to win this thing. Then when the war on terror happens and you've got Bush in the White House, he becomes the opposite way. He becomes very anti-American. I think he took it too far. I think he became a bore with that. And also very, very anti-Brexit. He took Irish citizenship. Was one of the very last acts as a protest act against Brexit. It was written in the press very much as a protest act. I know loads of people have taken Irish citizenship for a number of reasons. So these books, these kiss and tells, have really begun to affect le Carré's reputation, because I guess, I don't know, can you really take someone seriously as a paragon of moral virtue when he's running around having affair after affair after affair? It's a real compulsion with him. Anyway, when I was working with Ellroy on our biography, Love Me, Face and Danger, we talked about this. He told me how he would have loved Sisman to write his biography, which I didn't take any umbrage at. I think, it worked out for the best. I haven't spoken to Sisman. I nearly did want to tell you about that in a moment. But like, everything happens for a reason. I don't think Sisman knew much about Ellroy. Therefore, like, maybe he was like, why would I do this from scratch? But we ended up joking about it, because when these Kiss and Tells came out, Ellroy said to me, "Oh, maybe Sisman got bored of chasing down ex-girlfriends and ex-mistresses, because I was chasing down Ellroy's ex-partners all of the time." I spoke to about 20 of Ellroy's ex-partners, and that's no word of a lie. And they were great conversations, and Ellroy did not censor me in the way that John le Carré censored Adam Sisman. We had really, really good conversations, but like, it's exhausting work. Obviously, talking to women about very, very intimate times in their life. And we're like, oh, maybe Sisman got really bored of that. He didn't want to do that anymore. It was too stressful. And then, as I'm writing the biography, Ellroy's ex-partner, Erica Schickel, brings out her book, The Big Hurt, about her relationship with Ellroy. It is a kiss and tell very similar to Sue Dawson's book, The Secret Heart, on John le Carré. And this took up a huge amount of my time as Ellroy's biographer, in terms of, talking to Erica. I think is a very great writer, and actually I think is a wonderful woman. But trust me, it just took up a lot of time. Ellroy was very concerned as to what was going to be in that book, and I actually read the book for her, and I had to explain to him everything was in it. And one day I'll tell you about that story, because that is a good story. And so the parallels, I was just kind of agog by it all. I was just like, oh, this happened with Sisman and Sue Dawson, and now it's happening with me and Erica Schickel. But once again, my relationship with Erica Schickel was very, very productive, and I admire her writing greatly. She got my book. She said, "I'm too nervous to read it because I'm in it." So, but she was supportive of my work, and she was very, very generous with me. Sue Dawson apparently did not like this book. She wrote a very scathing review of it in the Literary Review, because she felt like, if you're just listing the partners one after the other, and you're not going into any of the depth as to the feeling they had for each other, she felt that kind of besmirched their relationship, which she felt was, genuinely based on love. But hey, it gets complicated. It gets complicated when there's so many players involved. But all of the books I've mentioned today, they are all fantastic books. The biography, the Kiss and Tell memoir, The Secret Heart, Sisman's follow-up, Secret Life of John le Carré, and then finally, Love Me, Face and Danger. And, I think Ellroy understood why, I'd written 3 previous books on him, why I was a much more natural biographer, and he became very, very happy with me as his biographer, and we had a great friendship. It was actually a renewal, because I knew him previously. We'd had dealings with each other. It's always been very, very friendly, but over the course of biography, we did become friends. There was a little bit of tension later on, and there was a kind of a similar ending to that friendship as there was with Sisman and le Carré. But that's biography for you. Okay, thank you very much for watching. Join me next week for another episode of Ellroy Reads. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.